Hello again, this is Dr. Andrew Thorn at Legacy Sherpa. It's a late afternoon and I wanted to share chapter 2 of U-wun-ge-lay-ma with you today. And it's getting late. I've had a busy day. You've probably had a busy day or you're starting a busy day. Either way, or you're in the middle of it. But I hope you're listening. And I just want to remind you that I'm reading a chapter from my book, U-wun-ge-lay-ma. It's the first book that I wrote. And I'm not a professional at this, and by that I don't mean to diminish my abilities, but I just mean to say I'm not looking to have this perfect recording. I really wanted to think about it more like I'm having a conversation with you. And so, like, just understanding that and having you be involved in this, you may want to pause from time to time and think about things. I'm going to probably interrupt my reading with some thoughts that I have and that I can share. And so without any further ado, I'm going to put on my reading glasses and hit a screen share so I can share this book so you can see it if you want. And away we go. So this is chapter 2, and it's called Clearing the Way. If you have a good imagination, you may have seen yourself and others in the story of U-wun-ge-lay-ma, the tale of the name of the tree. If you read it without applying it to yourself or listened to it, then please take a moment and read or listen to it again with these two questions in mind. Which character in the story most resembles me? Which character would the people around me say that I am most like? I would imagine that the majority of us see ourselves as the tortoise, the hero of the story. We believe that we would remember the name, and we even tell ourselves that it is a simple name and wonder why everybody would forget it. We would have returned with the name, saved the people, and taken our rightful place as ruler of the world. Even though this is a fairly unrealistic belief, it is quite common. Most of us can easily see the faults and shortcomings of others, but we have a much more difficult time identifying or owning up to our own. As a result, we are unable and/or unwilling to see the obstacles that may prevent us from reaching for the next level. Consequently, some of the most successful people end up tripping on their own carelessness. Many never make it to the next level because they are blinded by their inability to see the truth about their own behavior. So they pass through life rationalizing their behavior and blaming others for their circumstances. This really does affect us all. Sometimes, like the hare, we trip over the smallest obstacle and forget who we are. Then we think we can make something up. We truly believe that we can create a counterfeit self and that no one will notice. When we lie to ourselves enough times, we can no longer discern the truth. We show up pretending to be something or someone that we are not. Even when our intentions are good, we are incapable of being authentic. We try so hard to make ourselves believe that we have the answers, but in the end, no fruit falls. At other times, we are like the kudu. We believe that our individual strength will carry us through life, even when we come up short. We think that our good looks, our fancy car, our million-dollar home, our physical strength, and our youth will shield us from paying the price when we fail. Unlike the hare and the springbok, the kudu never even tried to make up a name. He just went to the tree and admitted that he had forgotten the name. He knew he would face no consequences because he was the biggest and the strongest. Because of his superior strength and ability, nobody would dare call him a failure. He got a pass because nobody had enough courage to challenge him. Most of us probably didn't think much about the hare, the springbok, or the kudu. We understand their shortcomings. They seem minor, so we forgive them. Their reasons for forgetting seemed innocent enough, and we can imagine ourselves running into the same set of circumstances and facing the same problems. We just would have been more focused and remembered the name. The lion, on the other hand, seems to have no excuse, and it is very difficult for us to show him any sympathy. He forgot the name of the tree because he was too tired to continue on. He paused to take a nap, and when he awoke, he had forgotten the name. When he got to the tree, he was too proud to admit it. He had forgotten it, and instead of admitting it, he insisted that he knew the name. He just kept repeating the word to the tree, hoping that the fruit would fall. But that wasn't the worst thing that his pride caused him to do. His grandest form of denial was that he believed that since he couldn't get the job done, nobody could. When it was suggested that the tortoise be sent, he said, "Let him go. Since we have all failed, it is best that he should fail also." The lion never believed for a minute that the tortoise might be successful. He assumed that since he had failed, everybody else would fail too. In his mind, nobody could be successful. If you are normal, you might have thought something like this as you read about the lion. I know somebody just like that. Very few of us would ever think, that sounds something like I would say or do. Yet most of us, at some point or another, have treated others in exactly the same way as the lion treated the tortoise. Before we can effectively consider our journey to the next level, we must understand a significant problem. This problem is significant because it affects everyone, even the most successful of us. In order to conquer these impediments, we must be willing to look deeply into our own behavior. Eliminating these traits is a difficult process, but success is not possible until we do. The inability to see our own faults combined with the ability to project those faults onto others is called self-deception. Self-deception is the process of denying or rationalizing away the relevant, significant, or important evidence that growth is needed in order to maintain forward progress. It generally results in blaming others for our problems instead of creating the development plan we need to grow and become our best selves. As a result, our growth is stymied. Despite the hideous nature of self-deception, it is normal behavior. Each of us, in some way, is afflicted with this problem. We suffer greatly because of this affliction, yet we do very little to combat it. It touches every aspect of our life because it filters our experiences and keeps us from seeing things as they really are. The reason we do so little about it is because we rarely know when we are doing it. The symptoms that we so easily detect in others are very difficult for self to observe and detect. Each success we enjoy creates a false sense that all is well. Each time someone overlooks one of our faults, we tell ourselves that our faults don't matter. Self-deception dulls our ability to see our own faults and potential growth areas. This subtle decay creates blind spots that keep us from seeing the next steps in our own personal development. There are two prominent forms of self-deception, that which we consciously do and that which we do unconsciously. They both prevent us from being our best. They are both detectable if we focus on the right questions. We may never be able to eliminate self-deception completely, but we can grow. All it really takes is a desire to become better and to move forward. The conscious form of self-deception is most clearly demonstrated by the way we receive feedback from others. Many of us, when given true and accurate feedback, decide to defend against it instead of believe it and do something about it. This choice to defend our wrongedness and debate the people that have given us the gift of feedback limits our ability to grow and progress. The more we debate and defend it, the less interested those around us become in giving us future feedback, even when we need it most. I call this a conscious form of self-deception because we usually know that the feedback we are receiving is true. Our hope is that we can convince everybody else that it is not true. We hope that others will not see our flaws or that we can convince them that they must be confused or that they didn't see us accurately if they do. A conscious choice is made to defend the behavior instead of correcting it. We say something like, if John really knew me, then he would not think that way about me, or even, this is the way I am, and if Tina doesn't want to accept who I am, then I don't care what she thinks. This type of thinking prevents us from addressing the problem. We get lost in our excuses and reasons instead of solving the problem. So how do you fix this problem? The first step is to accept that John and or Tina are right. This does not make you wrong. It just means that the feedback that they have given you is an accurate reflection of how they see you. You may be right too. You may be very good at the behavior or competency that they are criticizing, but they have not seen you at your best. You simply have not demonstrated this skill to them yet. The diagram here illustrates the point. Let's assume that you interact regularly with John and he thinks you are a bad listener. Let's also assume that you possess terrific listening skills and that John doesn't really know you that well, even though he interacts with you often. This relationship can be diagrammed in the following way. And so if you look at this, there's this intersection between you and John. On your side is your true but secret living skills. And on the opposite side, on John's side, are the assumptions and the judgments that he makes about your listening skills. The only information that is available to John is what occurs in the intersection of this relationship diagram. This intersection represents the regular and frequent interactions that you have with John. Even though he only sees and hears what happens during these interactions, he later builds upon what he sees and hears by making judgments and assumptions to create meaning. The only information John has to go by is your behavior during each interaction. If you behave poorly during those interactions, for whatever reason, then you have kept your true self out of the interaction and it remains a secret to John. He only sees what you put in the public domain. The only way you can change what John thinks is to put more of yourself, more of your best self, into the interactions you have with him. You have to widen his access and expand the zone. We often fail to do this out of simple neglect. We think we can get by without stretching the zone, so we settle for that. And I would add that we think we can get by, and it's painful, uncomfortable to stretch the zone. So usually we get by because others are unwilling to confront us. This makes it easier for us to keep doing the same old, same old. We convince ourselves that there is no need to grow. We don't have time to grow, and that nobody expects us to grow. Then we act surprised or hurt when we receive anonymous 360-degree feedback telling us that we have not grown or that we need to grow. One of the most interesting things I've discovered in giving feedback to lots of different people is that each person knows what the report is going to say before they see the report. I know they know because I ask them what they think the findings will be before we look at their report. They tell me, and then when we look at their report, they are always right. They say that they have heard it before and often for a very long time. This is why I call this conscious self-deception, because in almost every case, the person knows what others think and refuses to do anything about it. For some unknown reason, hope exists that they can keep on doing what they have always done without any concern or need to change. They figure that if they have gotten this far without changing, why would they have to change now? Thus, they deny themselves the opportunity to grow and improve. All forms of self-deception keep us from seeing our own contribution to the problem, but the unconscious form is especially blinding. The lion demonstrates this perfectly when he projects his own failure upon the tortoise. He never legitimizes his own failures by admitting he failed. He simply shifts the focus to the tortoise and equates slowness with a lack of power. He believes that the tortoise will fail because he was not able to travel a great distance without forgetting the name of the tree. He believes that just as he did, the tortoise will tire, rest, and forget the name. This is the most common form of unconscious self-deception. It is the keen ability each of us possesses to identify our own faults in others. When somebody we know or even don't know demonstrates one of our own faults, we are quick to judge and belittle them. When we do this, it takes the pressure off of ourselves and places it safely onto somebody else. We don't have to look at what we are doing or who we are. We can just point our finger at others and condemn them for doing what we do. It is difficult and painful to see our own faults and weaknesses. When we do, it knocks us down and makes us feel inadequate. Nobody likes to feel this way. It is unproductive and it keeps us from becoming our best self. It is also difficult to resolve these feelings, especially when we are unable or unwilling to do something about them. The easiest way to avoid this feeling and to avoid doing something about it is to transfer our discomfort onto somebody else. When we notice one of our faults in somebody else, we no longer have to recognize it in ourselves. Each of us truly dislikes, even hates the faults and imperfections that encumber our own characters. Sometimes, despite our successes, these very faults can cause us to dislike and even hate ourselves. The identification of these faults in others makes it possible for us to avoid this debilitating form of self-judgment. I don't think I am unique in the behavior that I'm describing, but I realize that I can only speak for myself. When I reflect upon the reasons why I dislike the people I do, I usually discover that it is because of some character flaw they possess. Upon deeper reflection, I find that I usually possess the same character flaw and that this is a part of me that I do not like. Since I am most productive when I like myself, I am willing to do everything I can to push these feelings of dislike and inadequacy onto somebody else. In other words, I don't want to dislike or hate myself, so I dislike or hate somebody else for the very characteristics that I am unsatisfied with in myself. Another blinding form of unconscious self-deception is the propensity to blame others for what happens to us. I'm going to back up again. I want to unpack that idea. So I read this really interesting book. I don't remember the name of the lady that wrote it. I think it was Debbie Ford, but the book was titled The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And if you're really interested in thinking about how we project our negative characteristics and behaviors on somebody else, then I highly recommend that you find this book and that you read it. It really enlightened me more on this topic, and I've read it since I wrote this section of U-wun-ge-lay-ma. But it is really easy to project our faults onto somebody else, and that is a very counterproductive thing to do. But as I mentioned, it's easier to dislike someone else than it is to dislike my own self. So back to the text. Another blinding form of unconscious self-deception is the propensity to blame others for what happens to us. Our society is constantly confirming the idea that we are all victims and that somebody else is to blame. And boy, now more than ever, when I wrote this in 2010, I was thinking we were a victim society, but today we are a victim society to the hilt. We are constantly thinking about all of the things that make us victims, and we need to get out of that. As a result, more and more people are becoming powerless to become their best self. They are being lulled by the idea that it is not their fault. Many people in our society now believe that they are owed something, and when they don't get it, they feel as if they have been cheated. I am often engaged by organizations to develop and foster shared accountability. I'm usually met enthusiastically by the people with whom I will work. They tell me that they are glad that we are finally going to do something about accountability because no one else is acting responsibly. The other guy is never doing enough, and the person I am talking to is often the victim of the other person's inability to be accountable. The way out of unconscious self-deception is actually simple. The first step is to focus on a problem that needs to be solved. It doesn't matter what the problem is or where it is occurring. Just identify the problem and then take a look at all of the people and circumstances that contribute to the problem. After you have identified all of the key stakeholders in the problem, ask yourself, what is my contribution to the problem? As soon as you figure that out, forget about what everyone else is doing and go to work on resolving your contribution. It is the only part that you can actually change. You can't change everybody else or anybody else. They will have to change themselves. Even if you own the smallest part of the problem, resolving that part will reduce the trouble the problem is causing. This illustration shows or helps me put it into perspective. Some people own a larger percentage of the problem, but they still only own a part of the problem. So here's the graph. What is my contribution to the problem? Maybe you're the person at 2%, or maybe you're the person at 36%. I know in my experience, sometimes I own a large part of the problem and sometimes I own a small part of it. But once I identify it, I have power to do something about it. Once I focus on my contribution, I am free from the blame game and I no longer feel like a victim. My power is restored and I transition from a stagnant state to a state of growth, or even to a growth spurt. So before you continue to the next chapter, I want you to try this exercise. Think of a problem that is currently challenging you. Now think about all of the people who are involved in this problem and what they are doing to cause such trouble. Now include yourself in the mix and ask yourself about your own contribution to the problem. Ask yourself the following questions. What is my contribution to the problem? How can I best contribute to the resolution of this problem? What behaviors or competencies do I need to develop in order to help resolve this problem? Do I hold myself fully accountable in work, or do I shift responsibility when things go wrong? Whom do I need to stop blaming? Am I opened or closed to correction? How can I empower myself to grow in the ways necessary to resolve this problem? Who can help me grow? Carl Jung, the wise and great philosopher, once made the following statement. The greatest and most important problems of life are fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. As I ponder this thought, I realize that the only real way to successfully overcome self-deceptive behavior is to understand that it is occurring and then develop a plan to grow and move beyond it. U-wun-ge-lay-ma. I want to keep going. So back to these questions. You may have to like turn your dictation device off, whatever you're listening on, and write these down, or look at the screen and write them down while I'm speaking them, or ask yourself the question. In any event, I want you to take some time with them. So I hope you will find time to answer these questions. It is really important to be thinking about how you're contributing to the problem that comes into your life. And the more you do that, the more you're able to grow and to reach for your next level. Until you do that, you're stuck on the level that you're at. So again, this is Dr. Andrew Thorn. You're listening to my book, U-wun-ge-lay-ma, The Guide to Next Level Living. I'm grateful that you're here with me. You can always contact me through my legacysherpa.com website. Remember, the point of this is that you may have a desire to go deeper. And if you have a desire to go deeper, well, I want to partner with you and help you work on some of the things that we're discussing and talking about here. It's a great time. It's late in the evening, my time now. I hope wherever you're at, you're experiencing a moment of rest or a moment of peace. And I'll see you in the next chapter.